Hey guys, what's going on? It's MajiinBae. Welcome back to the channel. Today is actually the start of the regional qualifiers for Worlds. It's basically like the play-ins for Legends of Runeterra. 64 players from each server, 64 of the top players get to duke it out for a chance to be in the top 16 of Worlds. I'm setting this to go live at noon. So it will start 1 hour. My stream will start 1 hour from the time that this goes live at 1 p.m. Pacific. If you want to come hang out, see what's going on, and watch me try to make another run at Worlds. The format is pretty interesting. You either have to go 4-0 immediately to make it in top 16, or if you lose in one of your first 4 games, you have to go 7-1. Once you take 2 losses, you are out. I believe that the first 4 or 5 matches are played in day 1, and then the last 2 or 3 are played in day 2. I'm not sure on the specifics because I'm just going to 4-0 anyway, so why worry about it? I wanted to talk to you guys about my deck choices, why I brought them, what I brought, and all those kinds of fun things. Starting with this one. This is something you've probably seen a lot of, but maybe not exactly in this flavor. This is Seraphine Ezreal with 1 Kindred Splash, the Shadow Isles variation. Usually you see this with Victor, but we actually use Victor for something else, we being the Mastering Runeterra team. Victor was very, very strong, but Seraphine was the real, really important part of this deck. The deck just didn't quite function without her. She was way less good, or the deck was way less good without Seraphine, but we didn't want to all in our power level on Seraphine Victor Shadow Isles. I do believe that it is the best deck in the game right now. I think Red Gwen has a better tournament matchup spread, but I think on a power level basis, Seraphine Victor is the #1 deck in the game, which is why if you watch Worlds, you'll see that most of the lineups are engineered to try to take advantage of it. They're looking to beat the P&Z SI decks or ban them, one of the two. They're just really, really good. Quietus gives the decks a lot of strength for a little bit of mana now that everyone uses equipment except for these bar decks. But the bar decks are vulnerable to Quietus because it hits Ezreal, Seraphine, Victor, whatever you play, right? Quietus is just a super, super strong card right now. This deck's pretty classic, right? If you're not super familiar with it, maybe you haven't been playing much this season, Back Alley Bar really took off in a pretty big way. 6 mana landmark. When I'm summoned, summon a Back Alley Barkeep. Your new cards cost 1 less. Back Alley Barkeep is a 3 mana 3 or 4 mana 3/3. That for every copy of Back Alley Barkeep that hits the board this game, you get 1 random card added to your hand. So the first Back Alley Bar you play will give you a 3/3 and 1 random card from the game. All your new cards now cost 1 less. New cards is anything you haven't cast this game yet. There's a lot of 1-ofs and a lot of 2-ofs in this deck, and that is to really take advantage of not only Back Alley Bar, but look to flip Seraphine not as quick as possible, but still rather quickly. She kind of flips on her own, right? You have a lot of random spells, things with Pharaoh's Financier, Seraphine, Vayne President, Back Alley Bar, a lot of stuff like that. Piltover and Tellstones counts as 2 spells, for example. So you do flip Seraphine, but we're not looking to turbo flip Seraphine. Those decks, I find, with things like Flash of Brilliance and Trail of Evidence, give up in consistency and raw power for a quicker Seraphine flip, and I don't really like that. I like this deck especially to be just as solid as possible, and then it eventually has the win condition of flipping Seraphine. I don't need to turbo flip Seraphine and then land Ezreal and kill you before you kill me, because this deck is very capable of stopping basically anything that's thrown at it, given enough time. And so that's what we have here. There is 1 copy of Acorn the Hex Technician. It's just a good card. 1-drops that are a little bit more flexible are really good in these bar decks, because after turn 6, they're free, right? You play bar, and then your first copy of each 1-drop is just free. So Acorn's there. It stops elusives. It can make Glorious Evolution, Vengeance, Piercing Darkness, Sputtering cheaper, which is really, really important. Fallen Feline is a 1-of. Even though we're only down to 1 time trick, it's honestly not quite so much for the Hexite Crystal. It's more for just it's a 2-1-on-1, and that's good enough. Quinn, you can't lick near the mic. And that's usually good enough. The games go really long, so eventually you do cast your time trick, and hopefully you at least shuffle in your Hexite Crystal, right? But most importantly, it's just a 2-1. You could play Forge Chief over this, but I prefer having the Hexite Crystal to look out for in the late game. Sometimes you just need a Hail Mary, and it's nice to have it there. Pharaoh's Financier, I shouldn't have to explain this to anybody. The only thing I should have to justify is that I'm not playing 3, and that's because I just needed the space elsewhere. I wanted enough spells. You don't want to get super clogged down with like the really expensive stuff, right? It's nice to cast the first copy of things because of back alley bar. It's less nice to cast the second copy of things because then they cost full mana, and I want to cheat on mana. I don't want to play fair. So only 2 copies of Seraphine Ezreal here. Taking the slot of the third one is the 1 copy of Minion. This card's a pain in the ass to play against. Like, if you've ever played against Minion, you know. Your opponent just plays it and you're like, ah, man, like, do I really want to like attack into it, right? I'm trading a unit and everything. I'm trading a unit in just so that they can like play another copy of this stupid 2/1 next turn. Like, it's just really annoying, and that's good enough for me. It's a 2/1 with additional text. It's fine, whatever. It counts as a new card for back alley bar the first time, which is usually just fine. It's just there. Fan Club President is a 3 of. This is the only Seraphine version I think that needs to run 3 copies of Fan Club President. The Targon one, the Bandle City one, all like the Bilgewater one or whatever, all the other ones don't need it because they have their own like engines, and what they're doing is a more proactive game plan. The Shadow Isles one is a more reactive game plan, and so you need things like Fan Club President to really like get you back in the game. Plus, if you look at your curve, the only turns that you really have like something to do is like turns 2 and turn 6. Turn 2, you either play like Seraphine or Seraphine Ezreal or Minion, right? 6 hits there. You might use a removal spell. And then turn 6 is reserved for Bar, which is the most important card in the deck. So turn 5, you usually want something to do that like puts something on board, but also gets you prepared for the next couple of turns. Turns 5, 6, and 7, or turns 5 and 6 specifically, are really, really, really important tempo turns. That's when like Kayn starts coming down, right? Like you have the champions out of Plunder, like Trundle hits the board. They're really, really important turns, and so you need to be able to put something on the board. But then when you Fan Club President on 5, Bar on 6, well, now all of a sudden you can cast like 3 spells, and one of them is supposed to be a 5-mana spell, right? Like that's really powerful. That's a really powerful like turnaround, and so I want that as much as possible. Fan Club President, just an incredible card, even though it was nerfed. I can't believe this was 4 mana. One of Sub Percival could have been a lot of things. I just like it. It's just a cool card. I wanted another win condition. Our main win conditions are honestly like I would say it's Seraphine Ezreal, but like honestly, I won more games off Glorious Evolution than probably anything else. Because you draw it and you're like, wait, if I cast this, I'm not immediately dead, and then you cast it and your opponent dies. Pretty great card, I would say, in this deck. But you need a little bit more oomph, right? Especially because all of your win condition champions, Seraphine and Ezreal, die immediately to Quietus, which is just so mana efficient. Subpercival does not once you activate it. It's just like, it's just a good card. You can chunk in for some damage. Sorry, I keep forgetting to breathe. You could just chunk in for like 5 damage, put your opponent to whatever, like 12. And that makes it a lot easier for you to just kill them with Ezreal or Seraphine or any mix thereof, right? Moving on to the spells, this is going to be pretty standard, right? 1 Thermo Beam, 2 Pill Dove and Tailstones. I think at least 2 is pretty necessary, and I was considering even adding an Aftershock after that, because in bar mirrors, you absolutely want Aftershock to blow up the bar. And Pill Dove and Tailstone's Aftershock is already 2 copies on Seraphine, right? It's like it only costs 2 mana when you have back alley bar, and then you have Progress Day later in the game. Just a really flexible card that I'm really big fan of right now. Quietus is a 3 of. It's like, with the way the meta has gone, it's just become very, 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 very strong. Red Gwen specifically dodges Quietus really well, which is part of the reason why it's so strong, is it just doesn't care about it. But it's still so good that I want 3 copies. We have 2 Mystic Shots and then a 3rd Secret Mystic Shot, High Note, which sometimes is slightly better than Mystic Shot, but it's mostly just you're splitting a lot of these effects because of Bar and Seraphine. So we have the 2-1 split. The 1 copy of Time Trick because it's actually like not a good card. Like spending 2 mana to like filter your hand a little bit is not worth it. It just puts you down 2 mana. Yeah, sometimes you find something really cool, but we really need to be mana efficient. And Time Trick isn't. However, it is good enough to get the nod for the 1 copy. It shuffles Hexite Crystal in. It, Turbo Seraphine. It'll only cost 1 with back alley bar. And then once you leveled Seraphine, Time Trick's insane. So we still have the 1 copy here. We're only playing 3 copies of Pings, 1 Unspeakable Horror, 3 Vile Feast. If you're playing this deck on ladder, I would recommend 4 or more. Like 1 Unspeakable, 3 Vile is probably where I would start. But we trimmed 1. And that's a bit of a thing that has to do with like tournaments rather than anything else. It's because if we're up against a triple aggro lineup, this is not the deck we will be allowed to play, because it's just so good into the aggressive decks, like the aggro decks, Annie Jin, Lulu Jinx, like that kind of stuff. However, there is like none. Nobody brought aggro. There's like 4 whole aggro decks in the entire field. So whatever, I guess. But because we know that if we do play against a triple aggro lineup, this is probably going to be the deck that gets banned. We have to skimp a little bit on the anti-aggro cards, which is a really interesting part of tournaments that I don't think people talk about as much. Oh, I'm so sorry. Next up is Sump Fumes, just a good one of. I see people play Get Excited. I don't particularly like Get Excited. It does help your reach and helps you kill people, but discarding a card is a real cost. Like, you don't have fake cards in this, right? This isn't like, you don't have Dusk Petal Dust and stuff to discard. You don't have Flame Chompers. You're not running Boom Baboons. So if you discard a card, it's like, it's a real card that you're discarding. You are going -1 to deal 3 damage for 3 mana, which sometimes is perfect. It's exactly what you want, but I hate discarding cards when I don't have to, so I ended up trimming it. 2 copies of Drum Solo. 3 is just too much. 2 is, I think, a really nice sweet spot. 1 copy of Piercing Darkness. It's basically Vengeance 3, but it gets discounted on Bar and Seraphine because it's only a 1 of. Plus, I like Life Gain good. 2 Vengeance because it's, well, good. 2 copies of Sputtering Song Spinner. It's honestly not as good as you'd think anymore. It's really, really good when you have like Seraphine and Ezreal on the board, but since it takes so much longer for you to level Seraphine, Sputtering is not like the just insane like door slamming endgame card that it used to be, but it's still pretty necessary here because it does help level her, or if she is leveled, it gets pretty ridiculous. So we have 2 copies. And then 1 Glorious Evolution at the top. This is for like other Shadow Isles decks or bar mirrors, right? I expect to see things like Field Rush. I expect to see things like Nora Vagar. I expect to see a lot of bar decks, Heimer Jace, right? Like these kind of things. And 1 of Glorious Evolution is just a great way to be like, well, all my stuff is better than yours forever. And that's good enough for me. So it does get the nod over maybe a different kind of endgame card. The 1 Kindred has been really cool, actually, in helping some of your matchups that maybe are a little bit too close. Things like Vayne Kayn, Sivir Kaisa, right? Even like Trundle Timelines, like a lot of the decks where you're like, oh, these guys are too big to kill with pings. That's when Kindred comes out and is like, I got this. And so yeah, been a big fan of the 1 Kindred. I do think that like 3 Seraphine, 3 Victor is still the best way to play PNZ's Shadow Isles right now, but I think this is a pretty good substitute. So that's deck 1, and this is basically the deck we built our lineup around because we thought it was so strong, even though we knew people were going to come to counter it. And I can't really see myself regretting it. Like every single time in testing, we would say something has an insane matchup into PNZ Shadow Isles, but like you can never count out the Seraphine deck. Ever. Because like they're just gonna pull some bullshit and then you're gonna not win and then eventually you're gonna lose. And I love being on the side of the bullshit here. So big fan of this deck. It's my favorite deck in the lineup. Please don't ban it. Moving on is the other bar deck we decided to play. I call this one Big Cat Bar because it plays 2 copies of Pursuit of Perfection in the main deck. That's right. I'm playing 2 copies of Pursuit of Perfection in my Worlds lineup. So that happened. This champion split is 1 Zoe, 2 Aphelios, 3 Victor, and I'm going to get into that a little bit because a lot of thought was put into this. So originally, the Targon deck was 1 Zoe, 3 Seraphine, 2 Aphelios, right? Obviously, we can't run Seraphine in both, and we thought it was more important that it go in the Shadow Isles one. Now, the question was, can we make the Targon bar deck good enough without Seraphine? And that was something we really, really struggled with because without Seraphine, even sometimes with Seraphine, this deck struggles to like actually kill you fast, right? Like I feel like the Shadow Isles one has enough disruption tools and then it just kills you. Like it goes from winning to like you're never, like your opponent is just not in this game anymore, right? And the Targon one didn't really feel like that. You would be like winning really hard. Your opponent, like you're so far ahead, and then you would just die because you couldn't close the door. And your answers are kind of weird. So we wanted to change that if at all possible, right? And what we found was that if we add the victors to the Targon deck, it gives you a way to kind of shut the door in the opponent's face, right? If you get ahead, you get the victor going, it's a lot harder for your opponent to just pull a win out of their ass because you have this like gigantic unit who discounts your things and has a bunch of keywords, and sometimes you just kill them. Like sometimes you just play Victor on 4 and they can't answer it and then they die, and that's awesome. Like I love that. The 2 Aphelios, it was for a while 3 Aphelios, 3 Victor. Kever is on kind of the same lineup, and I believe he's on 1 Zoe, 3 Aphelios, 2 Victor. I switched it. Aphelios is really, really strong. However, he is very mana intensive, and this deck is incredibly mana intensive, almost more so than the Shadow Isles one for some reason. But what I found was that I would draw Aphelios and be like, okay, cool, that's pretty good. But then if I drew a second Aphelios, I was always like, oh, even if he died, because I just didn't have the mana to like do it again. Victor, on the other hand, every time I drew Victor, I was like, hell yeah. And honestly, that's usually a sign to me that something is really, really good. Every time you draw it, you go, nice. You're like, yes, all right, put more in. And then every time you draw something else and you go, that wasn't very good, then maybe you should trim a couple. And that kept happening with Aphelios, which was so like backwards to me because Aphelios is an insane champion and he's very, very good here. Especially with the Victor, because what it lets you do is just go Severum, Infernum on Victor and just win the game on the spot against a lot of decks, and I have done that a lot. But I don't know, the third copy of Aphelios just felt too clunky. I really like the 1 Zoe. It gives me something to play early. It gives me a little bit more elusive blockers, which is really important against the elusive deck. I felt like it gave us quite a few points, actually. And she's just a good champion that people kind of forgot about. Really nice off back alley bar. Plus, since we're running Pursuit of Perfection, these one-ofs on units are also really, really important because like if I just go Bar, Zoe, Dustbringer, like that's 3 cards for Pursuit, right? In a lot of matchups, you're playing Pursuit of Perfection because your opponent's just stone cold dead to it. Like if you cast Pursuit of Perfection against Vayne Kayn and you attack, they lose. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If they don't have the freeze spell in their deck, which most of them don't, they just lose the game on the spot. And so you are trying to like turbo that out where the Shadow Isles one isn't, but I'm still not playing the cards that I think are like bad. The cards that don't hold their own weight. These are like Flash of Brilliance and Trail of Evidence specifically. I do have super cool Star Chart in here, but that's because I think the Stun card and Equinox and sometimes Serpent can be like really nice and really good. So that's the general idea of the deck. Is it kind of plays the same style as like the Shadow Isles one, but it's a little bit more tempo heavy with things like Victor and Aphelios, and then it has the big cat at the end. The units aren't like, this is not super surprising. The only thing that I think might throw people off is that I'm actually running Clump of Wumps instead of like Ballistic Bot, and that's because Ballistic Bot is an 0-3 that requires mana investment to do anything. And then once he dies, I no longer have that card to discard. But the deck's not full up on like discard cards, right? We only have Poro Cannon, 1 Spacey Sketcher, and 1 Zana Urchin. That's only like 3 cards, and sometimes you hit something off like Back Alley Bar, but it means that I won't always have the discard card. I won't always have the Poro Cannon or the Zana Urchin in my hand when turn 3 comes around and my Ballistic Bot gives me an ignition. Now, if I want Ballistic Bot to do anything, I have to like sink mana into it. And like I said, this deck is very, very mana intensive. It's very mana hungry. So I put in Clump of Wumps because every time I drew Ballistic Bot, I went, But Clump of Wumps is just a 2/2. It's a bad card, but I play it, I trade it off with whatever, and then I have the card to discard to any of my things, right? Or it counts as a created card. And this is actually really funny, but having a burst speed created card is really important in some matchups, specifically the Shadow Isles ones, because it makes it so your Victor can't be quietest, which is huge. If you play a Lunari Dustbringer, I'll sometimes hold the Dust Petal Dust in my hand. That way, when I play Victor on 4, they can't quietest, because I could just cast Dust Petal Dusk, and his Augment pumps him up to 3. So that's a pretty big deal to me. The rest of the unit package, not super surprising. Like I said, there's going to be more one-ofs in this version because it is a big cat version. But yeah, Poro Cannon, Thermal Beam, Tailstones, nothing crazy. Spell Thief, I really enjoy Spell Thief in these decks. We have some Cyclers, 1 Guiding, 2 Pale. The 2 Pale is, again, another nod to Quietus, just to get Victor out of range. We have the traditional, like, 3 Mystic split here. 1 Super Cool, another Sump Fumes, 1 Drum Solo, 2 Big Cat, 2 Sunburst, Trifecta, and Hexbliterator. The Sunburst and Hexbliterator we were waffling on for a while. We started out with 1 Sunburst and nothing else in that slot, and then it felt really good. So we went up to 2 copies of Sunburst, and it felt really good. And then we started seeing a lot of decks like Red Gwen was everywhere, right? Vayne Kayn was everywhere, and Hexbliterator did a lot of work there. So we added 1 copy of Hexbliterator. Some people are running 2 and 1. I think Honestly, that might be better, but I like the mana efficiency of Sunburst a little bit more. And then we have 1 copy of Celestial Trifecta, which I was against adding, but what am I? Just kept pushing it, and so I put it in my deck, and it was insane. So yeah, 1 copy of Celestial Trifecta. Now this is the core. This is basically the lineup, is the 2 bar decks, right? This is what our entire lineup was built around. And then the third deck, we needed to have a couple of things. We really didn't want to have to ban Red Gwen, so we needed a deck that isn't a complete dog to Red Gwen, right? We also needed just a strong deck that was good into like most of the field. And then we needed it to not fold to elusives. So what we ended up on was a plethora of different things. Number 1 was actually elusives, was the Teemo Zoe elusives deck. It felt really good. The deck's very powerful. I just don't enjoy playing it. And that was the same with my team, is like we just don't like playing the deck very much. So it kind of fell out of our range, I suppose. Some of us, I think fully half of us, went the Feel the Rush route, which that doesn't surprise me. I would have played Feel the Rush or Red Gwen, but the problem is I don't win with them. Like I just don't win with them. I can't get either of them above a 60% win rate, and sometimes you just have to take a step back, look at the numbers, and go, "Yep, I'm not cutting it on this deck." Right? Like maybe I could figure it out. Maybe I could get better at this deck, and like really start pulling in the wins. But I usually don't even consider a deck for a lineup unless I have like over 60% win rate with it on ladder, or I think it's like a super niche pick that's like really going to get people, and those just weren't cutting it for me. So the last thing that I had left was Vayne Kayn. Vayne Kayn is an interesting one. This really only popped up over the last week, but it became incredibly popular in that time period. It's basically just like a mid-range deck where it looks so dumb. It looks like the dumbest deck. Like you just play Vayne, you play some Cultists, you play Kayn, you pick Red Kayn, you just attack a bunch, your opponent dies. That's the whole deck. That's it. That's all there is to it. And it just, I don't know, it just works. Like I would play this deck and it'd be like, wow, this deck's so dumb. Like I hate this. And then like I would just kill people. And then I would play a matchup and be like, man, this matchup probably sucks. And then I would just kill them. And it just kept happening. It kept happening over and over and over and over and over again. So much so that when I'd look at like my stats for other decks, I'd look at them and I'd be like, wow, 58% win rate with Red Gwen, not really where I'd want to be. And then I'd look over to the left and there's Vayne Kayn at 83% win rate or something ridiculous like that. And eventually you just have to look at that and be like, well, if it wins, it wins, right? And that's what happened with me and Vayne Kayn is we played a lot of it, mostly against it, to be like, okay, we think a lot of people are going to bring Vayne Kayn. What do we bring to beat it? And then like you can bring decks to beat it, but sometimes it just kills you. And then like the decks that don't beat it very well, just like don't beat it. And Vayne's really good, and Kayn's really hard to kill, and the deck's just, I don't know, it's just strong. It just gets there, and that's usually what I'm looking for in a third deck in my lineup. Is I want a deck that just gets there. Now it is an incredibly popular deck in the field for Worlds, and a lot of people came looking to counter it, or at least looking to not be soft to it, and I think they succeeded. There's a lot of Trundle Timelines, which is not a good matchup for this at all because Kayn isn't big enough to actually attack into anything. So we'll see how that goes. But overall, I'm pretty happy with my lineup. Like, I practiced a lot. I'm not really going to go too deep into the spells choice for this. The only big difference is that I'm running 2 copies of Single Combat and not 3 copies of Cataclysm or Furious Wielder. I like the Riposte. I like the Unforgiving Cold. This card is there just to make my opponents think twice. That's it. It's really good in like but like these are the same to me. They're really good in board-based matchups. Right, like Sivir Kaisa, Vayne Kayn, Mirror, and so I just have the split. That way my opponent has to worry about more. Heedless Resurrection is really good because you just revive your stuff. Like usually, actually, it's better to revive Vayne than it is to revive Kayn because this is like a really good Vayne deck with a Kayn finish. And Vayne lets you win with other stuff, whereas Kayn like is just a dude, right? He's a dude that comes back and he's really hard to kill, but like he's just a dude. Vayne does some like nasty busted stuff. So Heedless Resurrection will almost always revive. Heedless Resurrection will always revive Vayne until Kayn is leveled, and then I believe once Vayne is leveled and she dies, it'll always revive Vayne. So that's something to know. But yeah, the deck just gets there. I'm pretty happy with our lineup. A lot of people came looking to target basically exactly what we brought, which is pretty sad. For us, obviously, good for them. They made the right meta call. But I don't know. I just like I played a lot. I played like 12 hours a day for like a week and a half, right? For like 10 days straight. And I found two decks that I really, really enjoy playing. And these are the back alley bar decks. Like, it was really rough for me to see all the Ionia decks get super nerfed into the ground. Like, my entire playstyle was just gone overnight after the patch. And the only decks that I found that I really, really enjoyed were these back alley bar decks. And like I've mentioned a million times, I will always put preference into decks that I enjoy playing because I play them better and I play them harder. If I'm not really enjoying a deck, then maybe it's not good, or maybe I don't get it quite enough. So I play the decks I like. I like these decks. I like our strategy with them. I'm very happy to play them in the tournament. Vayne Kayn just gets there. We'll see if it continues to get there, but in my limited experience with the deck, it just kind of gets there. Anyway, yeah, those are the decks I'm going to be bringing. Really excited about the tournament. It's going to be starting at 1 p.m. Pacific. Come check it out either on my Twitch channel, or there will be a community broadcast going with the Boulevard. With Boulevard, where he's going to be doing like casting for the region. I believe he's doing all the regions, or at least 2 of them, which is insane. So go give him some love as well. Thank you guys so much for coming. See you next time.